from Long Arm Love Quilting. I work with a lot of customers getting their quilts ready for quilt shows. One of the questions that I get asked a lot is how to make a hanging sleeve for your quilt. There's several different hanging sleeves. Some hanging sleeves do not give you extra room to put the rod in it. And what happens is the hanging sleeve is very flat and the rod slides in and it needs to bulge someplace, so it bulges out towards the outside of your quilt. And when your quilt is hanging in a show, it's not nice and flat all the way down. There's a hump where the rod goes through and then the quilt hangs. And you would like your quilt to hang very nicely in a quilt show. So the sleeve that I recommend is a D sleeve. And the reason it's called a D sleeve is from the side, it looks like the letter D. And I'll show you one here that I have on my quilt. If you can see the edge of this, I'll pull it up. And there's extra bulk here. And it looks like a letter, let me turn it this way, I guess. It looks like a letter D, because there's bulk here for that rod to go through. And if I tilt my camera a little bit, you can see that the one behind me, it's hanging perfectly straight and you can't see, there we go. And you can't see where it's bulging from a hanging rod. So I'm going to show you how to create a D sleeve so that your quilt hangs nice and flat in a quilt show. So the first thing I do is I measure the width of my quilt and I add 2 inches, an inch for each side, because I'm going to fold this in, press it, and make it so it has a finished edge on the edge of it. I'll show you that next step. So I must have cut mine a little bit larger than an inch on each side, 2 inches longer. So my fold's a little bit more. What you want to make sure is I do a double fold, so there's no raw edge. And you want to make sure that it fits inside of your quilt and not hanging over any of the edges, because you're going to be sewing this onto the back of your quilt. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to stitch this and I'm going to stitch this, and I'll be right back. So I'm stitching both edges so that there's no raw edge to my hanging sleeve. This is the second side. So there's the sides are sewed. I can bring it down here so you can see. There's no raw edge. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to fold this piece in half. Just like that. And give it a really good press. You want to really press this crease, because you're going to use this crease to make the D sleeve. I might even spritz it with some water, so I have a really good crease. So you can see that. Maybe you can't hardly. Let's see if you can. There's on the edge here, you can see the crease. What you're going to do then is fold each side into the middle, into that crease. I'm trying to video and hold with one hand, so bear with me. You're going to fold that in and you're going to crease this. Don't go over this crease, because you want to keep that crease in there. But you want to make another crease right here. And then you want to fold this side in to the middle. Don't overlap it, just so it meets up. And you're going to give it a good press. And this makes a really nice hanging sleeve because there's room for the rod to be in it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this and I'm going to put my wrong sides together and I'm going to stitch a 1/2 inch. I'll be right back. I sat down at the machine to sew this seam, the long seam, with wrong sides together. And I think I misspoke. I said a 1/2 inch. I do a 1/4 inch seam, the length of it. So that's what I'm doing now. You just want to make sure that your fabric is lined up. My Janome has a nice thread guide on it that I can adjust. So we're doing a 1/4 inch seam. So I sewed the length of it. It's sewed. This is the seam I sewed. You can see there. And when you turn this over, that seam will go against this raw seam will go against your quilt. And this is why it's called a D sleeve. If you look at it from this side, there is extra room. You'll stitch this down and you'll stitch this. So you stitch across here, hand stitch, and then you'll hand stitch on this fold onto your quilt. And I'll put this on my quilt and I'll show you. So here's my quilt and here's my sleeve. Now the thing you want to watch is you don't want to put it too far up at the top, because when the weight of the quilt, it might bulge and hang over to the top of your quilt. So you want to bring it down just a little bit, about like that, like a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch at the most. And then you're going to stitch all along here, hand stitch it, and make sure you don't go through the front of your quilt, and hand stitch along here. You try to catch the batting, especially on bigger quilts, because it will actually have weight on your quilt and it could pull it. But if you look at the edge here, this will be stitched down and then there's room for the bar to fit in there. It's a great sleeve. I hope this helped you. If you have any questions, just leave me a comment and get your quilts ready for the show. Bye.